And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Richard Dolan, one of the best-known UFO researchers in the world and author of several groundbreaking books in the field, which include his large 2-volume history, UFOs and the National Security State, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, Alien Agendas, and more. Richard has done countless television shows, conference appearances, podcasts, and interviews around the world. In addition to ongoing book projects, he actively contributes to his website, richarddolanmembers.com, which is home to a large and active UFO community. Richard, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. It's nice to be on your program for the first time.
Richard, you've been researching UFOs for about 20 years. Did you see a UFO? And if not, how did you get inspired to do this work?
It's actually been longer than 20 years, which shocks me. But I did not get into this by a personal experience, not really. It was pure intellectual curiosity. That's really what it was. Back in the 1990s, I thought that my career path was going to be a PhD, professional historian. That's what I was working to do. At the time, it was United States diplomatic history, Cold War studies. It was all over about Harry Truman and the birth of the Cold War and the birth of the CIA and that. And that's what I thought I was going to do. And I will never forget, I was in a bookstore, actually in the city of Syracuse, New York, and I looked at a book on the shelf. It's a classic UFO book by the author Timothy Good called Above Top Secret. But it was the subtitle that caught my attention, which was The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. This is such a powerful title. And I thought, wow, okay. And even in the early 90s, I mean, everyone had heard of the claims of a UFO cover-up. I just didn't know anything about it. But I'll never forget, I flipped through the book. I thought, oh, it's pretty interesting. These documents, are these real? And here's a certain department that he's writing about that I had studied in my own academic work. And then he's talking about other people who I had studied their careers in my academic work, but not in a UFO context. So I immediately had this feeling of what I've since called cultural schizophrenia, where there's an official truth that you're supposed to believe, but then there's this other truth, an unofficial truth that maybe you're not supposed to believe, but might be true anyway. And I was intrigued enough to buy the book. The thing is, I did not want to have a big question mark hanging over my head in an area that I thought I was going to try to be an expert at, Cold War studies and all of that. And I just thought, let's resolve this once and for all. Was this UFO thing an actual thing? Was it important to our national security people? Did they care? And if they did care, did they ever resolve the question? Did they ever figure it out? And that was it. I thought, I'll do this for a month or two, maybe 3 months tops, and I'm out. And that was famous last words almost 30 years ago. And this is a subject that just grabbed me by the throat. It's never let go. It's got me. I'm a lifer. What I discovered early on after reading Tim's book and diving into other sources was that, oh yes, this was something that was taken very seriously indeed by highest level U.S. national security back in the 1940s and 50s. And as far as I could tell, when I started getting into it, I could not see a point in which they resolved it and washed their hands of it and walked away, despite their claims to the contrary. It was quite obvious that they became very interested in this. And then the clincher for me was once I discovered the mass of documents that had been released through Freedom of Information starting in the 1970s on this subject. And that's not an infinite supply of documents, but it's enough. It's many thousands of pages and many hundreds of pages of first-rate, really gripping, fascinating, sometimes chilling military documents that clearly attest to the reality of UFOs. Military pilots seeing these things, catching them on radar, chasing them, failing to intercept over and over again. And so I thought, after reading enough of these, I thought, okay, this is not a case of a a couple of mistaken identities here and there. This is an ongoing thing. And then, reading the documents, being able to tell that these top level generals and the like were obviously taking this very seriously. At the same time, the government's telling the public, move along, nothing to see here. So once I realized that that was the case, there was no way I was getting out. What was crazy is that for a little over a year, I simultaneously was doing my graduate work in history, as well as this other stuff, this UFO stuff that I didn't want anyone to know about, but which ended up taking all of my attention, and it actually just consumed me. And I ended up leaving the academic world, and I devoted myself the next 5 years to writing my first book, which was UFOs and the National Security State. And that was published in the year 2000 originally, and I've never looked back. That's been my whole life ever since.
That's amazing.
It's the most fascinating mystery for me that I could have dived into. And the last thing I'll just say is the UFO subject to me is it's like a crowbar that has allowed me to pry open a world of a lot of other mysteries and conspiracies and secrets just in general. It's gotten me into a lot of other peripheral subjects along the way, and it's absolutely enriched my life and on every level. So I'm very grateful for it.
I feel that the general public still doesn't believe or want to believe. Why is that? Like, are they afraid, or do they just think it's nonsense?
There's definitely a fear factor involved. I've seen this many, many times talking with people. I remember years ago when my kids were very small, I used to take them to libraries and parks and all of that. I remember chatting with another parent, a woman, kids are off playing, and she's like, "What do you do?" and I told her I wrote books about UFOs. And what was funny is she was briefly interested. Oh, that's interesting, right? And then when I talked even for like 30 seconds about the subject, I could see there was genuine fear in her eyes, and she cut the conversation short, and she made some excuse to leave. And that happens. I think what it is there's I think once people get to a certain age, particularly, we tend to think that we've got the world figured out, and now all we do is spend the rest of our life filling in the blanks that we think we already know. And the last thing you want to do once you get past even into your 30s, I find, is reinvent your worldview. People don't want to do that. In fact, I didn't want to do that. When I first dove into the UFO subject, I was in my early 30s, very early 30s, and I thought I was on my path, my PhD academic path. I thought I was ahead of the curve. I thought I knew a lot of things, and I didn't want to have to reinvent my worldview and therefore leave the profession that I was planning to do. It was very difficult. And I think that's pretty normal. I don't think people really want to reinvent their worldview. It's uncomfortable. It's unsettling, especially for people who I think are very well educated and who think they're really smart, because it's the insult to one's intelligence that's actually the toughest thing to handle. It's like you're 45 years old, you've been through your battles, your wars, you're in your field, you're at the top of your game, and then you have to admit, holy crap, there's this really super important thing that I have not even looked at. Like, that's a blow to the ego. And that is not to be underestimated. So I think there's definitely a lot of that. And on top of that, though, we have to keep in mind the UFO subject has a significant, massive national security impact, by which you go back to the 1940s when this first became very clearly understood by highest level U.S. intelligence. Look, these people knew full well that they had a tiger by the tail. And the question is, do you tell the public that you know for a fact that there's non-human intelligences here because you acquired some of their technology and you got some of their bodies? Do you tell the world? Well, we could maybe explore this a bit, but the short answer is absolutely not. But those people also had dominant influence over major media back then, as they do today. CIA, through its relationships and something known as Project Operation Mockingbird, all through the 1950s and 60s and beyond, utterly dominated American media. People to this day probably still don't understand the extent. And the point is that there is a program of ridicule through major media, through academia, through even politics, to push the UFO subject into the realm of the ridiculous so that serious-minded people would never look at it. And that was incredibly successful. And in fact, it's still successful. Even in this era now, post 2017, where sometimes major media will discuss this subject at a, approximately mature level, still there's a tremendous amount of resistance. I think, I don't know if it was Mark Twain or someone who said, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them they've been fooled. And that is absolutely true.
Well, there's so much activity lately. How do you keep up with it all?
The short answer is I probably don't, but I try. So in terms of activity, there's the news. People can call it the disclosure news, the congressional hearings, everything related to David Grush. We can certainly discuss that. There's sightings, there's activity going on galore around the world all the time. This is something that I think is still not really appreciated enough by people, is just the volume of extraordinary activity that goes around the entire world all the time. We're better in North America, US and Canada, at recording these sightings. So there's like a website, the National UFO Reporting Center, which I'm a big fan of. There's the MUFON database. They collect thousands of cases every year. There is no such equivalent database for other parts of the world to collect that number of sightings. But my take on that is, from the way it looks to me, there's just as much activity going on elsewhere. There's just not sufficient recording mechanisms in place. So I believe that this is an absolutely massive global phenomenon. Certainly sightings are seen everywhere. It's just a matter of how many, but I think it's a large number. I mean, how do I keep track? I've got a few very good people who do their best to send information my way. I do my best to stay on top of these things. And this is my life. This is what I do full time.
Can you give us a quick update with what's been going on in Washington with UFOs recently?
Yeah. I guess everything really, the latest wave of activity kicked off in June when David Grush was interviewed. He did a journalistic interview with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, and then he did a video interview with Ross Coulthart. And Grush is a former National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, and other high level, very, very secretive intelligence organizations. He has high level clearances, and he became an official whistleblower a little over a year ago when he complained that the Pentagon was withholding important UFO or UAP data from the UAP task force, which has been charged in the last couple of years with, I guess we could say, investigating the subject. Grush said, I am quite aware that the Pentagon has been withholding and deceiving the responsible authorities who are supposed to know about this. And so he complained. He went through the entire whistleblower process. He is an official whistleblower for that reason, and spoke to the debrief, which was where Leslie and Ralph wrote for, and then to Ross, and just essentially said, we have multiple acquired craft that do not originate from this civilization, and bodies which to Congress, when they subpoenaed him or they brought him to Congress, he described as non-human biologics. So he's said that, and he said much more. He said that there's been essentially illegal, and we can say criminal level of pressure applied to people involved in this subject. He implied, or maybe even stated, that people have been killed as a result of this. And so very significant bombshells. And because of his original statements to Ross Coulthart and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, he was asked to speak to House of Representatives, along with David Fravor, pilot, Navy pilot, and another Navy pilot, Ryan Graves, both of whom have become very well known and for having, while with the U.S. Navy, had their own incredible UFO encounters. Fravor, of course, the famous Tic Tac UFO, which probably everyone's heard about by now, and Ryan Graves off the Atlantic coast in 2014, 2015, had a series of extraordinary encounters that he knew of with his colleagues, and he's talked about. So those two accompanied David Grush, and this is the first time that Congress ever had something of this magnitude on this subject. There have been a couple of times in the 1960s, going way back, where there was brief, not quite hearings, but maybe a one-day symposium where a number of speakers presented research on UFOs in 1968, and then one other time in 1966, very brief. What happened this summer was of vastly greater significance and much more powerful information coming forth. So whether something will come out of it or not, we'll have to see. As a result, though, New York Senator Chuck Schumer did introduce provisions into the next NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act. And that's some pretty powerful language that he put in there. Essentially, Schumer stated or wrote in there that actually used the phrase non-human intelligences several times in the bill itself, which that's quite extraordinary. But then essentially included in the provision a mandate for private contractors, defense contractors, to report any non-human intelligence technology that they've got. I personally don't think that's going to go anywhere, but that's language that has been placed into the law, which I assume will be passed in a couple of months. And then the other thing that is in there is, the provision to essentially enable release of classified information or previously classified information on UFOs or UAP, along the lines, I think they said, of the JFK assassination law, which went through many years ago. So to release it. Not that that worked all that great, by the way. But anyway, the idea being to get a release of classified documents on UFOs for the public. So that's going in there. That's in process. We will see what that results in. The one other thing going on is that I can think of offhand is a study that is, we're told, being undertaken by, on contract to NASA. Also, a kind of a scientific analysis, we are told, of UAP or UFO data, and we will see where that goes. I'm not holding my breath that that's going to be something that I think is going to be a great study, but we shall see. So there are things happening, and my take on this, I'll just say this here, is that we are witnessing a battle go on. It's a factional war. And I think this is something that has always existed in the UFO field, that is within the classified world, that we're not looking at a monolithic system. I don't think we ever have. We're looking at a factional war. 70 years ago, there was one of the OG UFO writers, Donald Kehoe, talked about the secrecy group versus others who believed in getting some of this information out. That was the case in the 1950s. I think that continues to be the case today. And I think the result is what we're seeing. How this will play out over the next year or more is going to be the great drama that we're all going to witness.
I was wondering is it just really damage control and a blame game in Washington on who leaked this information and blaming each other? Or is it that Congress has just been left in the dark and they're kind of bent out of shape about that?
I do think the latter is definitely true to some extent. I don't have a complete inside fast track to what's going on, but I do have my little feelers out, and I do get information that I think is correct. And I have definitely been led to understand that the interest that has been shown by members of Congress is legit. They really are interested. I can believe that. the question is, what are they really going to be able to do about it is a whole other question. But do they care? Yeah, I think they care. The other thing you said earlier was, the blame game. Well, just recently, in fact, I should have mentioned this, the main UFO UAP body now that we've got in the government is called ARROW. It's Advanced Anomaly Resolution Office. And that's basically the new version of Project Blue Book, perhaps we could say, if we wanted to go there. But anyway, that office, the director of it is a Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And there was just an announcement this last week that there's a new head, or a new supreme head of the organization, and that is Kathleen Hicks, who is the highest ranking female in the Pentagon, from what I've read. And Kirkpatrick is now reporting to her. Now, she's just been doing a few interviews lately, not necessarily about ARROW, but just about fraud and other unpalatable activities going on in the Pentagon. So the impression that one might get is that the hearings left a very bad reputation for ARROW and Kirkpatrick, and it is possible, this is just speculation, that Kathleen Hicks is in there to kind of clean things up and make sure that they're being run. She talked a lot about transparency. That was like one of her big statements about this. So, which is what a lot of members of Congress were talking about during the hearings, transparency. My attitude is good luck with that, but we'll see how far that goes. But so that's what's going on. And the blame game, I think there will only be a blame game if this really gets out of hand. We might see a blame game, or we might just see a bunch of rats jumping a sinking ship and talking about what they know that's on the inside of this whole secrecy. I mean, that's the thing that I keep waiting for, is how bad can this get? Are we getting close to an avalanche effect, as it were, where you start seeing things snowball, as it were? A little over 10 years ago, I co-authored a book on exactly this subject. We called it AD, After Disclosure. Still to this day, the only book on the subject that's ever been written in the UFO field. On, like, how could UFO secrecy end? And if it were to end, what next? I think we got a few things right, and we certainly underestimated a few other things. One thing that I underestimated back then was, I assumed that when there was a big UFO bombshell, if that were ever to come out, that it would immediately snowball into this avalanche. And that has not happened. We've had some very big revelations, but not the kind of avalanche effect in which the public gets so worked up that they absolutely demand answers. And that has not happened. And I think my reason for that, I think, is just that we've seen dramatic consolidation of media control over the last decade, essentially. When we wrote that book in 2010, that was a different world. And I think from 2014, 2015 onward, we started seeing a transformation of social media and big tech, Google search algorithms and the like, I think, have gone a long way toward containing this issue. But we'll see how it ends up. The game is still wide open at this point.
I think also that there are so many posts on social media that appear to be fake that even if they are real, we just kind of glance at it and think, oh, it's probably fake, and move on without even giving it, critical thinking.
It's part of the effect of living in a bubble community. Like we really have a bunch of little bubbles now. I mean, for all of the downside of the pre-internet era, I mean, one thing that would happen is you had a much greater sense of cultural unity. People would watch the same TV news. I mean, it was mostly all propaganda and a lot of lies, but they watched the same news. We believed the same stories, and we were kind of on the same page with each other. Those days are gone, of course. So now everyone's in their own little private Idaho, their own little ideological bubble. The left doesn't speak to the right doesn't speak to the left. and all other kinds of subgroups are out there that they don't speak to each other. And so, yes, it's very easy for people to be very dismissive of information that comes their way that they're not used to, because there's so much more of the stuff they do like that they can just keep reinforcing their worldview with. So, but to what you're speaking, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of BS out there. There's a lot of lies, straight up propaganda. I think a lot of it probably comes out of Langley, CIA headquarters, or their contractors. They're bots. They're what are known as sock puppets, basically fake personalities, fake people, or real people who take on fake persona, and they just flood message groups. Now it's more and more algorithms that are doing it. You don't even necessarily need real people to do that. So we don't even know. There's the so-called dead internet theory. Have you heard that? Like 90% of the internet's basically bots. I don't know if that's true, but I'll bet there's a lot. We're moving into a crazy, crazy world.
I love the words that they use, non-human biologics. Have you ever seen any reports of what they look like?
Yes. Well, all right. So it depends on how we define reports. So there has been a lot of investigation over many years on this very phenomenon of what we might call UFO crash retrievals. This really got going in a big, big way in the later part of the 1970s. It really started taking off as a discipline. And most people are familiar with the name Stanton Friedman, who recently passed away a few years ago. Stan was involved in that. There was another researcher named Leonard Stringfield who did even more in terms of researching this area. And having spoken to many, many of those individuals, he put these together in large reports. And yes, we have, we can call them reports. Let's call them testimony. That Stringfield in particular did the lion's share of getting a lot of these out. So speaking with, in one case, a medical doctor who he spoke at length about having done an actual autopsy on an alien being. I think it was about 4'2", 4'3", looked like it weighed about 50 pounds, kind of like a gray alien, essentially. That's how he described it. Stringfield spoke to high-level officers, other people with clearances who talked about their experiences with alien bodies, or sometimes the spouse of a deceased person who had done that type of a thing. And he collected these, and there's a lot of consistency in these stories, so that the scenario that really does come forward is that there have been multiple instances in which, how do you put this? Aliens have come down in craft and have been acquired by the United States military. And some of them alive, most of them dead, and have been placed in storage at places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or other locations, along with craft, technology. So you have technology and bodies, and they're both part of the story. I mean, the number of data points speaking to this are literally too many for me even to discuss here, but there are quite a few. I've written about this at great length in many of my books, as have other people. There's a lot to go there. So I think there's a tremendous amount of smoke. I presume that there's fire beneath that smoke, and multiple instances of let's say acquisition of UFO craft. So it's a heck of a secret, and it's an explosive secret, frankly. It's one thing for the government to say, "Oh yes, there's something out there. We'll study it and get back to you people." Like that's what they want to be able to say. But it's a totally different thing for the government to say, "Oh crap, yeah, well, we've had some of these bodies for about almost 80 years now, and the craft, uh, that's not an easy place in a time where you are not supposed to believe in conspiracy theories ever again. Those are considered wrong now, bad conspiracy theories. How would it work if the president or some other important person were to say, "Well, don't believe in these other conspiracies. Well, the UFO one, yeah, that's true. It's only like the greatest conspiracy of all time." That's just not going to work. It's not an easy position for the United States government to be in, to acknowledge that, yes, it has been actively lying about the UFO subject for an entire human lifetime. So it's going to take a lot to pry that one out and get an actual admission.
I know it's a very simplistic question, and there's probably many answers, but why are they covering it up? I mean, is it a power play
Yeah,
or?
well, power is always the number one reason for everything. It's the driver of human history. It's all about power, I think. Go back to the 1940s. Pretend that you're President Harry Truman. All right. So, and I'm your top general, and I come up to you and I say, Mr. President, we have apparently recovered technology that does not originate from this civilization. And oh, yeah, there's alien bodies too. So now you've got this information. So are you going to tell the world? Well, here's the thing about that. In 1947, the United States had a monopoly of another bit of technology, atomic bombs. The Soviet Union was actively working on that, but they did not have an atomic bomb. In 1947, it turns out the United Nations wanted the United States to make atomic technology under UN control. The reasoning being that this technology was too important for one nation to have sole possession of. America's answer, by the way, was no thanks. We'll keep this. Thanks very much. This is going to be ours, because they didn't want to share it. They didn't want to let that secret out. They didn't want the Russians to get that secret prematurely, and all of these reasons. So if they're not going to want to share atomic nuclear technology, I mean, how in God's name can they be expected to want to share something as exotic as alien tech? That's holding the future in your very hands. Not only is it power for you, but if you give that to the world, that's power for your enemies. It's powerful for people and groups you don't trust. I mean, if you had, let's say there's a free energy solution to UFO propulsion, let's say somewhere in the mix, these objects which can zigzag, stop on a dime, instantly accelerate, defy all laws of aerodynamics that we know of. Clearly, maybe they're using, among other things, a technology to create some kind of anti-gravity, but maybe they're using an energy source that's better than high-octane gasoline. Probably they are. Well, there's been a lot of speculation about that. Free energy would be awesome, but what if that free energy solution could also make a really nifty bomb that could, I don't know, blow up the whole Pacific Ocean? So now you've got a real problem here. Like, how do you manage this? This is not necessarily an easy. Now, by the way, I don't know that that's the case, that they could blow up the Pacific Ocean, but these are genuine possibilities. There's a danger in any of these new technologies. And I could see even a reasonable person thinking, we've got to maintain control over this. We can't just let this go out. Now, the problem with secrecy, with all secrets, is that it is a source of power, secret information that you can do things with that other people can't. You probably make money off of the secret. You probably can develop deeply classified research and development, fabrication facilities that can maybe make some innovative products based on this tech that you've discovered. Now you've got a great ground floor investment opportunity to make $1 billion. Who knows? Like, that's a goose that lays golden eggs. Now your incentive for giving this up goes down to less than zero. So I think there's a variety of motives that went into the creation of the secrecy, and ever greater motives that are in play to prevent that secret from coming out. One is admitting that you've lied. Another is, fears, whether real or legitimate, of what technology might be able to do. I mean, it's great to have the ability to have free energy and heat your home forever, or air condition your home for free forever. But again, there are always other potential uses that could be dangerous for such technology. And I have no doubt that's one thing that they're thinking about.
Are you aware of any tech in the public sector that has come from UFO craft?
Only the claims that have been made. 25 years ago, there was a very important book published called The Day After Roswell by a man named Philip Corso, who was in the United States Army for many years, and was a very well-known individual. In fact, was known among members of Congress and the Senate. He had a lot of respect, and wrote a book toward the end of his life in 1997, The Day After Roswell, where he said, yes, in 1960 and 61, I was part of a team to segue acquired alien tech to private industry so that they could make use of it. And he talked about high tensile fibers and fiber optics and Kevlar and a bunch of other things that he claimed came at least indirectly, perhaps directly, out of a study of some of this alien tech. I could believe some of it. I think some of the bigger breakthroughs could be in areas like material science, which I think is very obviously they've got some very, very advanced sciences there in terms of creating very resilient and incredible materials with incredible properties. I think we're getting into some of this now with so-called meta materials, which are this type of a thing. But to answer your question fully, no, I mean, I'm sure there's much that I do not know. There is a claim, at least a hypothesis by Dr. Bob Wood, who's still with us. He's quite up there. Bob Wood's a brilliant man, worked for many years for McDonnell Aircraft. Bob Wood believes that the transistor itself, probably the most important invention of the 20th century, came out of the study of alien tech from 1941. 6 years before Roswell, there was an alleged event in the state of Missouri at a place called Cape Girardeau. And Bob Wood believes, I think he does believe this, that the transistor, which was patented or invented in 1947, came at least in part from that crash. Is that true? Good luck trying to prove that one. I don't know if that's true or not. But Bob made a pretty decent case for it, and it could be true.
We only met today, and you don't know a lot about me, but we talk a lot about near-death experiencers and what they see on the other side, which a significant people do see what Chuck Schumer describes as non-human intelligences, or ETs. What is your take on ETs being interdimensional beings?
I've spent most of my career looking at it from the extraterrestrial hypothesis perspective. I continue to think that that solves more problems than some of the other hypotheses. But I will just say to you and the audience here that I do believe that there's a dimensional element to this phenomenon, and that even if they are extraterrestrial, that doesn't mean that they haven't mastered space-time manipulation in some way. That could very well lead me to think that there are dimensions that are beyond this one that we can see. I mean, look, modern physics opens the door for a multiverse, different ways of understanding what the multiverse is. But one is that there's dimensions like right in front of the nose of your face. You can't see that, but they're there. I think that could be true. And I have my own reasons for thinking that there is a reality beyond the veil of what we can perceive. I do personally believe that. And could there be other entities that inhabit that region? I think, yeah, I do think that is absolutely, I would say it's probable, in fact. The beings that people run into, if they think they're running into gray aliens or some other kind of alien, are they actually extraterrestrial, or do they live in this other realm? That I don't know. But I think that let's just say I'm very open to the likelihood that there are other entities that inhabit other realms of reality that we don't fully understand. We don't have the physics of, but I think that they're there.
I watched you on, I think, the Fifth Kind TV with our friend here, Paul Wallace, and you had mentioned
I
that
enjoyed that interview quite a bit. He's a great guy.
he is, and we've had him a couple times, and you had mentioned that before. I'm not sure how you put it, but you didn't believe in life after death or something, but now you believe we go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What changed your mind?
I wouldn't exactly say that I was like a total atheist. I mean, I went through that phase in my 20s, yeah, a long time ago. But I've gone through a number of changes in my perspective on this whole matter, and I'll give you a very short version of it. When I was in my early 20s, that's 40 years ago. I'd convinced myself that I was an atheist, and I had this idea that, I said, well, we only believe in God because we're When we're born, we're helpless. We have our parents who seem omnipotent and omniscient to us, as far as we know. And so we develop a psychological dependency on God the Father, God the Mother, God the Parent. And back then I thought, well, I'm not going to believe in something just because I think I'm psychologically predisposed. I have to believe in it because I think it's true. That's how I always was. But around that same time, I had a dog, and I was feeding my dog a can of dog food, I'm opening up, and he's watching me. Like, he knew exactly what was happening because we'd gone through this before. He's a smart creature. So I'm watching him eat the dog food, and I'm thinking, well, he's very intelligent. Like, he knows me. He knew that I was about to feed him dog food, and he knows a lot of other things that I'm not even aware of, sights and smells and sounds. But he did not know how that dog food got into the can to begin with, because he's a dog. He's not going to understand that. He doesn't know what the moon is if he howls at it. It's a whole bunch of things dogs don't know because they're dogs. You don't expect that. And I thought, well, gee, Richie, do you think you're so smart? So your dog's at this level, you're at this level. What's at this level? What's at that level? What's higher, even still? And I realized, for me to be just a strict atheist saying there's no such thing as a transcendental reality just because I can't understand it, how arrogant, how foolish, really, how stupid. And I thought, I'm going to have an open mind. And so from that point, I've kept an open mind, but I try to be empirical. I try to be scientific about it to the extent that I can. So now, so I've been kind of agnostic, on the fence about a lot of that for years. But no, I actually do believe, can't say that I know, because I haven't died and I haven't experienced it, but I've spoken to people directly who've had intense near-death experiences, just as you have. I didn't interview them for shows, but I've just spoken privately with folks who've had that. And that really, the clincher was when my father died. My father died in December 2018, so going back a few years now. And it's funny, he lived 150 miles away from me at the time. I had spoken to him on the phone that day. Last thing I ever said to my father was, I love you. I'm so glad I got to say that. He was not well. I didn't expect him to die. So I'd spoken with him on the phone that day. It's December 2nd, 2018. I'm in the living room with Tracy, my wife, and we're each on the couch on our laptops doing work, typical evening. And I had just installed recessed ceiling lights in the living room that were on a dimmer setting, so they could go dim or go bright. And I didn't install them. I had a licensed contractor who knew what he was doing. He put them in there. And I was so happy with those recessed lights that I had them on at the moment on the dimmest setting, just because I thought they looked cool. So Tracy looked up at one point. It was a little after 8 o'clock at night, and she said, "What is going on with those lights?" And I looked at them, and they were going bright, dim, just like that, just at this pace. And I was so crazy. It was so funny. I got all huffy. I stood up. I was like, "Brian's a licensed contractor. That was supposed to be installed perfect." I'm getting all worked up. I go over to the lights and I'm watching them. They're just spazzing out, just very regularly, though. And I jammed the dimmer switch up and down a few times, turned it on and off, and that was the end of it. 15 minutes later, my sister called me to tell me our father had died 15 minutes earlier. He died when that happened. And look, there could be skeptics watching this. They could say, that's a coincidence. You're not going to convince me. Sorry, I'm not buying it. That's not a coincidence. Now, what's crazy to me is my dad, this is like his final gift to me. My dad was a character. I'll just leave it there. I loved him to death. He was a great man. I'm thinking, did you just like fly 150 miles over the New York State Thruway to get into my wiring, to find the one place in the house that would get my attention, and to say, "Hey, Richie, look over here and see what I can do"? And I actually think that's what he did. And this is just a crazy thing to think about. But obviously, he didn't use GPS to get to my house. He couldn't have found my house when he was alive. But he found me. And so I firmly believe that human consciousness somehow has the ability to go way beyond geolocation points and space-time points, and somehow to go into, this is literally another dimension, because we have, the three spatial dimensions and we've got the dimension of time. Somehow he blew past all of that and found me and communicated with me to let me know, I think, that he was okay. That's what I think. So that's not a near-death experience. That's a death experience, but it's one, I will never, I remember that like it happened 5 minutes ago.
Do
I'll
you
never forget that.
do you think it's possible that he still tries to communicate with you, like leaving you dimes or pennies that you find often, or feathers, or dream visitations?
That's a wonderful question. And I don't know. I'm not always observant enough to notice, oh, there's an extra penny lying around. Thanks, Dad. I would not have thought. I've got spare change lying around, and maybe I should pay a little more attention to these things. In terms of dreams, I've lost both of my parents now. My father died first. I lost my mother a couple of years after that. And no, I really haven't had many even dreams. Once in a while, I've had a couple of dreams about them, but not too many. None that really gave me what I can recall as being like a deep message. But I'm not, honestly, my wife is way better at remembering her dreams than I am. It's not, I don't remember them very often, is the truth. In terms of looking for signs, I have not yet seen one, but I'm open to it, because I do think that there's a survival of some. I think ultimately, I don't, what do I know? I really don't, I can't pretend that I know, but I suspect that we eventually merge back with, I do believe that there's an ultimate divine spirit in this universe, and I call it God. Or we can call it the world spirit. Reading a book on Rosicrucianism right now, old, a century old, and he talks about the world spirit that inhabits all of existence. And I think that's probably not a bad way to look at it. I think that we probably rejoin that ocean at some point after we're gone, after our bodies die. But it may not happen right away. Like, I suspect there may be an ability to retain some semblance of personality, maybe for a while in the next dimension. I think that's possible, but I can't pretend that I know. I'm just guessing here.
Quite a few experiencers report that on the other side, they are in some realm where they know everything. They just can't bring
Yes.
it, they can't bring it back. And I feel like maybe there's a unified field of knowledge there that you kind of link up with.
Well, hey, before I even published my first book, this is in the late 90s, I made a living for quite a while, writing professional resumes for job seekers. Thousands of people, every kind of background you can imagine. One-on-one, I had to make people, I was sort of like a therapist and priest and hairdresser. I had to make people look fabulous, but I also listened to their whole life story when they're freaking out over, like, what do I do with my career? Believe me, people told me everything. I did them for thousands of individuals. One guy was a plumber, did HVAC work. He's just like a regular dude. Very soft-spoken, though. He actually wasn't regular, because he had flatlined for 10 minutes at a local hospital here in Rochester. He had a motorcycle accident, he said. It was a number of years before. And he said, yeah, I'm not afraid of death anymore. I said, well, why? What happened? He said, well, I didn't go through the tunnel. I didn't see the light, but I had a life review. And he said, look, I saw every single thing that I did in my life. I'm like, in 10 minutes? He said, yep, I know it sounds crazy, but somehow I did. He said, not only that, but I saw everything that I ever did from every perspective imaginable, the perspective of the people that I was with. And then ultimately said, I guess you could say, from the perspective of God. And this man was so low key, so unassuming, so down to earth. I had no choice but to absolutely believe him, which I did. And he said, I didn't want to come back. which I'm sure you've heard countless times. He did not want to come back. And he said, but I'll tell you right now, not afraid of death in the least. I know it's there, and it's perfectly wonderful, and it's going to be great. So that was his experience. That affected me. He told me that in 1997. I've never forgotten that. And I absolutely believe him. Not a shred of doubt in my mind that he was sincere. I don't know how it's physically possible to do a life review in 10 minutes, but I believe him that somehow, outside of the realms of space and time as we understand it, he did it.
I have a theory that I'm working on that when you have a near-death experience, it changes you fundamentally or energetically in some way, because there are experiencers who, after having their NDE, start having UFO contact.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm aware of this as well.
And I think that
And some of them became world-class remote viewers as well. They develop other capabilities.
So I'm wondering if somehow it changes something within our energy signature or something where UFOs can actually either spot them, or now I guess they have an ability to see them when the rest of us can't.
We're on a similar wavelength here. I think I agree with that. First of all, it's an absolute fact that people who've had NDEs are way more likely to develop genuine psychic gifts as a result. I mean, this is almost a cliche. I think it's got to be true. So that's one thing. So I think something does change. It's not just a perspective. I mean, you could say maybe once you've gone to the other side, even briefly, you're open to it and you kind of know how to access it. But I suspect that you say energetically, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that changes, or some neuro pathway makes a connection that wasn't there before. I don't know, but I think something does change. And in terms of connections with extraterrestrials or aliens, I suspect that is the case also, because, I mean, if you are an ultra telepathic alien, which, I mean, all of the encounter testimony that we have, nearly all of it, essentially says that these beings are extremely telepathic in some way. So if you're a very telepathic alien and you're looking at the mass of humanity, and then you see, oh, this light bulb's burning way brighter. Yes, of course, I think you're going to be interested in that. I think you're at least more likely to want to say, let's take a look at that one over there. Anecdotally, I've spoken to so many people who've not told me about near-death experiences, but even something as simple as saying, I began meditating very seriously, and 6 months later, I had my first UFO sighting or my first encounter. I've heard that many times. So I think there's something about our consciousness that is critically important in this whole scenario, that any visitors looking at us, at least some of them, I think, would be quite interested in.
Do you think that they're all benevolent? Because there are reports of people saying how kind and, benevolent and great ETs are. Or there's some bad apples as well?
I do not believe they're all benevolent. I think, I don't want to be highly judgy here, but I just think it's very foolish to think that all life forms out there are going to be benevolent. Particularly life forms that have the ability to go from one, whether it's one dimension to another or one planet to another. Because to be able to do that, you have to develop a high level of intelligence. And I only know of one example of a species that developed a very high level of intelligence. That's humanity. And we did it by becoming apex predators and hunter-killers that learned to dominate this planet and enslave, if you want to put it that way, all other animal forms and plant forms on the planet. We don't even think about it. We tell the cows, you're working for us now. Sheep, goats, okay, over here. We're going to eat you in a little while. Pigs, get over here. Chickens, like that's what we do. We have birds in cages. We love our animals, our cats and dogs, but they're ours. We control them. We don't even think twice about it. We've taken this entire planet and we have just said, okay, this is ours. We're going to mine it. We're going to get the minerals. We're going to, like, all of this. Plants, we change them genetically. We do it all now. We don't even think twice. We're used to having our own way. Even when we're nice about it, we are used to getting our own way. And I would be shocked if other advanced life forms are not similarly used to getting their own way. They may have started, probably they did start as aggressive life forms, because the fact is life eats life to live. That's what it does. Unless you're a plant, then you can get it through photosynthesis. But if you're an animal, by definition, you are eating other life forms, whether plant or animal based. So you are a killer. And we know the story of evolution of life on Earth pretty well. And it's essentially a story of hunt or be hunted. And and intelligence is a quality that evolved necessarily as a survival quality. And it's a great one. It's the ultimate one. So I think, yeah, I assume if there are other aliens with forward-facing eyes that have binocular vision, that's what predators have. They have, other features about them that allow them to dominate their planet. I'm sure they dominated their planet just like we do ours. So that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to put us in their cookbook, okay? But we have to assume they're a life form. They are not only interested in maintaining themselves as life forms, but they're probably interested in making their lives as nice as they can for themselves. Are they interested in other resources? Well, I don't know, but I would be surprised if they weren't. I look at a planet like Earth. I think we can assume that there's a lot of other beautiful planets out there that have life, but how many really have as much life as Earth? We've hit the jackpot. We're not just scratching out some life in like a desert environment. We have life everywhere. The unbelievable volume of life and density of life. We have a moon around us that helps protect us. We've got this amazing magnetosphere. We've got all these beautiful oceans, and it's perfect. If there's another species that is able to appreciate just how rare and how beautiful our planet is, they probably want to look at it. Do they covet it? This I don't know. But then they come and they see us, and they see, by the way, that we're about to leap right into their world, because we're going into a transhumanist phase, which scares the hell out of me, to be honest with you, but it's happening. Doesn't matter what I think, it's happening. We're exponentially about to leap into the world that they have, with strong AI, nanotech, quantum computing, genetic engineering. I mean, the whole thing. It's all just coming together all at once. So our collective power as a species is shooting up like a rocket. It's not even comparable to what it was 50 years ago, let alone 100 or let alone 200 years ago. It's a very short period of time, cosmologically. So they know that they have to watch us. We actually are worth keeping an eye on. Do they support what we're doing? Are they concerned about us because we like to throw our weight around a little bit? Well, these are all fair questions. So are they all benevolent? No, I think that would be a very unwise decision to think that. Are some of them benevolent as we would understand it? Yeah, I think probably. I think there's evidence in some of the encounters that people have described that show me maybe most of them are actually don't have an axe to grind with us. But I would be very surprised if of all of the intelligences that are able to observe us, and I think that there are many, I would be shocked if all of them are actually philanthropic and have our best interests at heart. I think what we should expect is that they have their best interests at heart, which may or may not include helping us in whatever way.
Do you think they are actually intervening with us in some sort of capacity?
All right, so you're asking some pretty good questions on a first interview, I gotta say.
Thank you.
I've wondered this many times, and I would say this: if the governments of Earth were to entrust me with a strategy for looking into this. One thing that I would say is implement a counterintelligence program to examine that very possibility. Because it would be I could easily see it as in the interest of an arriving species to insert themselves into our structure of power and to guide, maybe they would see it that way, in a very benevolent way, to guide humanity in a certain way, or to control humanity in a certain way. If they are doing that, I don't really like their methodology very much. I'm not a big fan of the development of our society over the last decade, but someone is guiding it. I think that there is definitely a lot of manipulation going on. And I think it's an open question as to whether or not we're being guided by, are we simply being guided by a human cabal, or a cabal that can insert themselves into the human power structure and make themselves seem human? It may not make much of a difference in the long run in terms of the final outcome, except who's the ultimate landlord. That might be the ultimate difference. So it's a possibility, and I can't say that I have the answer to it.
Richard, time has been flying by, and I need to get to this before you go, and that is that you are going to be speaking at Disclosure Fest, Stairway to the
Yes.
Stars in Vegas. What's going on with that?
Oh, this is really going to be fun. Stairway to the Stars, or Disclosure Fest, is they've been doing this now for a number of years. Most of them have been, I think, in the LA area, but this one's in Las Vegas at the Luxor Hotel, which is the big black pyramid in Las Vegas. I've been there a few times. Luxor is an awesome hotel. And yeah, this is a very big event. It's November 10th, 11th, and 12th in Las Vegas. Tracy and I are both speaking there. The organizers, Adrian Valera, we really like Adrian a lot. I have a very high regard for him. And this is just a huge event. So I'm speaking there. My wife, Tracy's speaking there. Nick Pope, David Hatcher Childress is speaking there. Stephen Bassett, a lot of the James Fox filmmaker. And then there's the whole esoteric group, ancient technology, human origins. Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology, is going to be there. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, just a lot of other. Bashar, the channeler, is going to be there. And it's going to be a big bash. So it's in Las Vegas at the Luxor. I would encourage people to go. I mean, the fact is, pre-COVID, I traveled all over the place, everywhere for events. I don't do that much anymore. I think there's 2 this year that I'm doing. This is one of them, and this will be in November. So if there's anyone who's interested in my work or Tracy's work, this will be a chance to see us. You come and meet us. Go to the Luxor for Disclosure Fest. I think it will be. I'm looking forward to it. I'll say that.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may have questions for you. Should they go to your YouTube channel and leave comments, or to your website?
Oh, well, that's a nice question. My YouTube channel is Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. I put up videos there fairly regularly. Yes, I can always read comments. I look at the comments. I don't reply to comments on YouTube, but I do look at them frequently. A better way to reach me would definitely be to write to me through my website, richarddolanmembers.com. You don't have to be a member of the website to write to me from there. There's a Contact Us tab, which actually the messages do get to me. We've got a very excellent assistant who goes through those and actually makes sure that I look at them. So they can find me that way. Or they can even join as a member, which is even better because there's a lot more that they'll get out of it. But they can just reach me through that website, richarddolanmembers.com.
I was on your YouTube channel, and I noticed that you released an audio book of one of your older books, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind.
Yes, I did. Yeah, that was a book that I originally wrote about a decade ago, almost. And last year, actually, I significantly expanded that book. I wrote a very long chapter to bring it right up to date, to the end of 2022. So it's much more up to date. And then the audiobook part of it had been in the making for too long without being done. I finally finished it. I'm the narrator of it myself. This is the one audiobook that I have read. And finally was able to get that up there, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and people can definitely download that if they wanted a good audiobook. Thank you for asking. That was a nice surprise question.
Well,
I'm happy with that. That took a lot of work.
I was going to say, how long does it take you to do something like that?
Well, there's writing the book, which is one thing, but then doing the audiobook, for me, it's time consuming. It's not my main skill set. It's not my forte. I mean, I have decent enough equipment now that I can record it, but no, it's very tedious and time consuming, and I make mistakes constantly. You got to go back over, clean up the mistakes, over and over with post-production editing, but it's done. So it took too long.
Well, better late than never, right?
I'm very glad it's done. Thank you.
Richard, do you have anything else that you're working on that you want us to know about, like a new book or something?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I am working on a book that deals with, I guess we can say, the history of USOs, that is, unidentified submersible objects, water-based UFOs. This is something that I'd always been interested in the past. I can't say that I was an expert at it, but over the last year and a little more than the last year, I have been very seriously researching it, collecting every single USO case that I can find, and just analyzing it, studying it, deciding, do I want to put it in my collection or not? And then really my goal is to do each one of those cases justice as a piece of writing, so that people can actually appreciate just the full breadth and power of that phenomenon of water-based UFOs, which it's some of the most astonishing research I've ever done. It's some of the most engaging, fascinating research I've ever done. And I expect and hope to have that book out either by the end of this year or the very beginning of 2024. I'm closing in on between 350, 400 pages now. I don't even have any illustrations, and I still have another few hundred pages to go. It's going to be a very, very large collection, but I'm excited about it, and I think it will be timely. I think people will want to see this book.
Well, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sometimes I get accused of being a black-pilled person, and I do. I see a lot of dangers. I think we're moving into an era, very likely, of global digital totalitarianism, to put it mildly. I think we have a lot to be concerned about. But there is a lot for us to be, first of all, grateful for. I mean, hey, we're in the game. We're here in this amazing place called life, and we get to appreciate it. I do encourage everyone to enjoy every single day they have. Every day is a gift, and there's beauty in every single day. As far as with the UFO subject, I would just say that we as a society deserve to know the truth on what is going on with the UFO phenomenon. We are citizens of our country, where we are told we live in a free country where citizens have rights and where government is supposed to be transparent to the people. The government works for us, not the reverse. That's one thing to remember. But we're also citizens of the universe. We're citizens of the cosmos. We are part of a larger community, whether we recognize that or not. We're part of it. We've landed on Mars. We've landed probes out to the farthest reaches of the solar system. We are working our genome. We're doing all of these unbelievable achievements of science, and yet we are still being denied the truth on what is going on relating to other intelligences that are here. There is a cover-up. There is a conspiracy of silence and of deception on this, and it's not right. We deserve to know the truth. And that doesn't mean that the truth is going to be easy to deal with, but we're also not children. We're adults. We have to have enough respect for ourselves to know that we not only deserve the truth, but can handle it responsibly. And I think that we can do that. And I do believe believe that the time will come sooner rather than later when this whole messy business is going to come out there. And we're going to have to learn to deal with it. We're going to have to learn to deal with all of the upset of having to change our worldview, the fear that is inevitably going to happen. And out of that fear, out of that uncertainty, we're going to have to find courage deep inside ourselves to make ourselves equal to the task that's ahead of us. And I'm always going to believe that we can do that.
Richard, thank you for your message, and I look forward to you having that new book out so I can have a reason to get you back.
Oh, it will be my pleasure, Jeff. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Thank you, and have a great trip.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.